Welcome, everybody, and thank you for continuing to participate in our Triton Leaders Conference on allyship this year. I hope you've had a wonderful day and enjoyed the sessions you've been able to catch so far. And I want to welcome you to one of our Paving Your UC San Diego Allyship Journey breakout sessions, this one on supporting students' basic needs. My name is Kevin Price, Director of Alumni Engagement here at UC San Diego. I'm very excited in just a moment to introduce our student panelists to really give you the perspective of current UC San Diego students on what those needs are and what's being done to fill gaps in meeting what some of those basic needs are. Before we hop in, I'd like to just review our UC San Diego principles of community that guide all we do here at UC San Diego, especially during an event like this. And these principles include providing fair treatment for faculty, staff, and students, encouraging a climate of fairness, cooperation, and professionalism, fostering inclusiveness, respect, and a welcoming environment, and promoting collaborative attitudes and actions. So please do bear those in mind for all that we do during this session. As we get into some of the questions we have for our student panelists, I just ask that if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try and sprinkle some of them in as we go along, or if not, get to those at the end of our session. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our two student panelists. First, Kayla Monette is a fourth-year cognitive science student and UX designer, is current president of the Student Foundation. Kayla has advocated for student and alumni support of the Basic Needs Hub, CAPS, and student scholarships. Kayla is also the design coordinator for the day.
I'm not sure if my audio just cut out momentarily. I'll just introduce myself. I am the president of the Student Foundation, and I am a fourth-year student. I will be a UX designer after graduating, and I'm just really passionate about helping out my fellow students. And I'm seeing a lot of friendly faces in the audience, which is super awesome. So thanks for coming out today.
Thank you, Kayla, for joining us. Our other panelist is Katie Yang, a second-year student and trustee on the Student Foundation. And Katie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name is Katie Yang. I'm a second year, majoring in business econ, minoring in accounting. I joined Student Foundation as of last year, and I plan to run for president next year. So I hope to bridge the gap between alumni and students more so that we could have more events together such as this.
Great, thank you both for letting us know your perspective, where you're coming from, as well as what you've been doing with Student Foundation. Just in that vein, I'm hoping to start out, you can tell us a little bit more about the Student Foundation, and as we segue into today's topic, what led you to get involved with it?
Yeah, sorry, I just reconnected my audio. I can finally hear everybody again. Yeah, so I became involved with the Student Foundation around, almost 4 years ago. That makes me feel kind of old. But I got involved because I've always really been passionate about helping out students. I myself am a first-generation college student, and I honestly, I'll be a bit vulnerable today in this meeting because this is all so important to me, but I don't think I'd still be here and be graduating without a lot of the help and the support that I got, not just from the Student Foundation and from mentorship there, but also from a lot of the other amazing resources we have on campus. I mean, when the pandemic started, I went through the Basic Needs Hub. I wouldn't be able to complete my studies here without being on a scholarship. And so, I know firsthand how tough it can be to be a student, and the amount of help and support that we've gotten from our alumni and the Student Foundation, and also the opportunity to help out our fellow students and to get them passionate and excited about, in the future, helping out and supporting things that we have on campus, like the Basic Needs Hub, that are just so important.
Like Kayla, I joined our freshman year, so my freshman year, as I've said. I actually will say that it was a little difficult to join clubs as my freshman year of college was all online. So I didn't get to experience any library walk or any clubs, pushing flyers into my face, any form of that. No really in-person connections. So I actually found Student Foundation through social media. One of the big events that Student Foundation does is the finals care packages. And that's one of our main events when it comes to outreach. And I think it's a great event we have. And I'm so glad to finally be part of Student Foundation because we give joy to students on campus, whether that be through small little care packages or even providing scholarships to help them continue with their studies at UC San Diego and to be able to achieve their degree here. So I really hope that we can continue helping students because education is important and a lot of people here are trying to achieve their dreams. Like my dream is to achieve my CPA by the time I graduate. So working towards that 225 quarter units, and I hope to continue to do so and to help others like me achieve their dreams.
Hey, thank you both for that introduction to what you do as Student Foundation and what got you interested. I know both of your answers referenced how different things have been over the last couple of years with the pandemic. And I think we'll get into what some of the unique situations with that are in a little bit. But my first real question for you is what would you each want someone who maybe isn't intimately familiar with, the daily needs of today's college students to know about some of the challenges that are out there for students today?
Yeah, I love this question because it's actually been a really big focus of my presidency this year. When it comes to fundraising, I think the first kind of gut reaction is to support students academically and to expand, our institution academically. But right now, with everything going on, for so many students, it's not a matter of all these new cool classes they can take, but a matter of it doesn't really matter if I can take this cool new class if I don't have a place to live. And so I personally know a few friends of mine this year that have been living out of their cars just out of necessity. And it's something that I've really been emphasizing to our alumni that right now, the best way we can support our students is by supporting them with housing insecurity, with their basic needs, because, like anyone, if your basic needs aren't being met, it's hard to thrive anywhere else.
And I'd like to add that, yes, Kayla has worked really hard when it comes to pushing for students' housing needs. And I do agree with that, especially since with the pandemic, we've had to push out a lot of students from living on campus. As a second year, we used to be guaranteed housing on campus for 2 years, but recently they sent an email saying that due to the pandemic, we are unable to host triples. So we lost a lot of room on housing and a lot of people were unable to live on housing. I was lucky enough to be able to live on campus because they had a lottery system. And so I just got lucky there. Otherwise, I would have to find a place off campus. But I do know that a lot of my friends actually wanted to stay at home because it would save money. It would be a lot easier to just have classes online like we did our freshman year. Kind of give up that college life if it meant saving money on rent. And I think another big, not as big as housing in terms of cost, but it's also technology. It's the fact that with classes, we need some form of an iPad, a tablet, or like a computer to be able to go to these Zooms classes online and have a reliable Wi-Fi connection. And that's really difficult when you're living in a situation that doesn't really give you that opportunity to have that. For instance, super random, but at my house, if you turn the microwave on, we have no Wi-Fi. So if any of us are in a meeting, we can't use the microwave. But in more extreme cases, if you don't have Wi-Fi, you're unable to attend any Zoom classes. So I think having a reliable technology source is also important as well.
Thanks to both of you. I know both of your answers touched on this quite a bit. And Kayla, when we were discussing this session, you mentioned that you had lived on campus at the beginning of the pandemic and have since moved off. What was that transition like moving off campus? And, you know, obviously it's a very different situation for you. What has that meant for your studies, as well as just, you know, your college career in general?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was honestly, it was pretty terrifying. I know this is being recorded. I don't see a reason why, my parents would view this, but I mean, when I was making the transition and moving off campus for the first time, I didn't have anybody to help co-sign a loan for me or help me financially. I mean, it was at this time where my parents were asking to borrow $50 from me on like a weekly basis. And there are lots of resources out there for helping students with that transition. But I think that there is more that can be done. Like Katie, I got really, really lucky. I decided to move to San Diego before the housing crisis happened. And so I'm living in my apartment at an extremely discounted rate. But I mean, right now I'm seeing students offer up their living rooms for more than what I pay for a single room in a nice apartment. And I think like I looked into emergency housing options. I'm just reading this comment really quick. Yeah, so I think when it comes to the Basic Needs Hub, they're an amazing resource. They've helped me so much, and I think they cover so much ground that a lot of students can fall through the cracks. It's hard. I don't have any specific numbers for the Basic Needs Hub, but I know that other resources that are similarly, struggling and understaffed, like for CAPS, for example, for every 1,400 students, there's one psychological counselor. And similarly with the Basic Needs Hub, it's tough because they have a team of people that are doing so much good, but there are just so many students right now that need help. I think as far as concrete examples of solutions, I know one solution that fell really short this year was emergency housing. And so for students that were living in their cars, the Basic Needs Hub partnered with local hotels in the area to provide emergency housing on a nightly cost basis that was on a discounted rate. But the cost per month of sharing a hotel room with another student was around $4,000. And that was at a discounted rate. And that's simply not sustainable. I think you could rent a whole home here for less money. And I see that UC Santa Barbara's housing resources had a similar program with hotels, but they were able to provide rates that were a bit more realistic and sustainable, I think like around $25 a night. And so obviously we're at a bit of a different point now with some students taking virtual classes, but I know that especially last fall and perhaps again this spring or next fall, it might be a really good opportunity to expand that program and look into what we can do.
Great, thanks. Obviously, really interesting perspective there. Katie, you're living on campus. You're coming to us from a dorm room that I think a lot of people are very familiar with the traditional college experience. What has life been like moving back onto the campus after so few students were on campus during the pandemic? And, how have things really, what's that adjustment been like for you? But also, what does that feel like when it's not necessarily up to the level of service or the level of being filled that we're used to on campus?
Well, I know that in terms of my second year and living here, I love my roommates very much. We live in a small suite and the Rita Atkinson residences where we both have double singles, essentially is what it's called. It's called a mini double. So if you can see here, it's a bunk bed, but our room size is a single. So it's actually quite different. I lived on campus for about 2 weeks as of last year because I assumed maybe we would go back in person, and then it was all online. And then I was like, oh, I will head home, save some money, go home. So I stayed there. But the 2 weeks I was there, I was in a double. So that room was twice as big as this room. And there was definitely a lot more space. I'm lucky that my roommate and I, we don't really take up as much space, both of us. So it's very spacious in here. But I think that when if you don't have a roommate, and this is for people who want to have a roommate, not saying like the singles, it's nice to have someone to talk to all the time, especially when you have online classes. You can feel lonely, maybe even homesick. So moving on campus and having someone with you, it could be your new friend, like my roommate. And also, it's just someone to talk to. Like Kayla said, that the CAPS system, while it's really helpful, it is a little difficult to get a hold of them sometimes because they're not open 24/7, but your roommate lives with you. So at least you have your roommate to talk to, joke around and everything like that. So moving back on campus definitely felt very different. It felt like there was no COVID, which is really odd. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But in terms of like COVID regulations, besides masking and taking a test, it didn't really feel like there was anything else, which I guess is nice in some way and also a little scary. It's for a college life experience. I don't know. I don't have one to compare to. I don't have one to say like, oh, this is what college is supposed to be like. So I would say that it's sufficient, but not something that I expected.
Would I be able to add to that very quickly?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, like we're not so sure exactly what the college experience is supposed to look like. But I did just want to add that I know that maybe these aren't the most exciting topics of conversation, but these aren't issues that are unique to UCSD. They're issues that are, being tackled by every single college in the United States right now. And even though some of our experiences are definitely very unprecedented, there is some solidarity in the fact that there are millions of other students that are, facing the same issues as us. Uh, and so it's kind of nice that I guess we all have each other to bond with, as you're saying. But I am very appreciative for the efforts that UCSD has made. I think a really huge silver lining is that we've definitely been leading the US in our COVID efforts, and pivoting back and forth definitely hasn't been easy. And I know that's something that for everybody in here that's on staff, that's something that we're all in together as far as, all these changes. And so like I do want to shout out our student body and our staff just for their resilience because I mean, uh, those student friends of mine that are living out of their cars and making it work. I mean, I'm just so proud of everybody kind of coming together and honestly hosting this conversation. I'm really thankful that we have this platform to speak and that there are people in this room that are listening and willing to support because I just think empathy and awareness are the key to really take that first step of tackling any issue like this. So sorry for interrupting, but I'm just very thankful to be here.
That's perfect. And we're happy it's a free-flowing conversation where these ideas can build off each other. And so we hope people will take out of the conversation is that, what's learned in this, hopefully, as our whole Triton community gains this perspective. we learn how to better ally with today's students as well. Katie, I'm really glad you brought up the social aspect of having lived off campus, now moving back on, what it was like to sort of make that transition through, starting college with a lot of uncertainty around not just housing as a basic need, as something you need, but also as something reliable and that provides more than just a roof over your head. And so I'm curious, I know you both have mentioned caps, but how have you and your peers adjusted to all of that change? And is it something that really has been a strain for you all in terms of mental health and in terms of, just that general socialization that, we've come to expect as part of the college experience?
In terms of like mental health, it's nice to have roommates once again. They definitely help a lot, especially when you're not alone. The social life aspect is really hard, as I think with COVID, we're not able to really like walk into other people's suites and just like start talking to them. Literally, I communicate with the suite next door to us by using the window and like tapping it and just saying hi through there. It's much harder to connect with people these days. So a lot of social groups and friend groups are much smaller than usual, but I think that a lot of us are also being able to transition to this online platform. It's taking a while, but we're getting there. We can evolve. I'm hoping that if we go back in person in spring, it'll definitely get better and we can start like moving forward. Because as I've said, even like meeting alumni, I would love to meet all of you in person if I could. Zoom is great, but in person is so much better. Even be able to shake hands again, or, air shake in person still. But I think the in-person connection is just super different from being remote. So even though like our social life has been moved online, it's not as bad. Like our mental health is still there. If we have like our core group we can still talk to, I think we're gonna do okay, as long as we have people to talk to. But in person, highly recommend.
That's fascinating. I know those of us that work in alumni engagement have been excited to be able to hopefully soon start gathering groups of people in person again. And it's very odd to think about how, for those of you that are students now and will be alumni in the near future, that will actually be a way that you probably meet a lot of people that you may not have gotten to over the course of the pandemic, because people were just spread out or distanced in ways that, there wasn't a lot of that normal social interaction. And sorry, Kayla, it looked like you were about to chime in on that as well.
No, I was just thinking honestly the same thing like Katie Fan said in the chat. It's just so resilient. Props to you, Katie. I mean, I'm very lucky that my COVID didn't really affect my high school graduation or my first year of college, because honestly, all of that was so formative. And props to you, because it definitely sounds really tough. And back in the day when I was storming, I was in a triple. And even as someone in a triple, mini doubles were definitely like, oh man, that looks rough. So yeah, props to you.
Now, we touched a little bit on food insecurity in your earlier answers. And Kayla, you said something interesting, that a lot of the issues that are facing UCSD students are not unique to UC San Diego. They're not, just this campus or just this student body. They're national. And I think one thing that surprises a lot of people who are not currently college students or have not recently been college students is that so many students face food insecurity. I know you touched a little bit on what's happened on campus and what Student Foundation has been doing, but do you mind just going a little bit more into depth about what that is really like for our student body in terms of the food insecurity issue?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I would be classified as food insecure. I am currently on CalFresh, which is, I really want to hand it to Triton Food Pantry this year. They've done a fantastic job. They've done so much, uh, not just in expanding their programs. I think they collaborated with a delivery driver platform. I want to say Uber, but I could be wrong, to like literally get groceries delivered to students, but also their digital presence, their ability to adapt and address the needs of the student body and how they would change during the pandemic. I think now one of the biggest things that Triton Food Pantry has been doing is, not all their students are in San Diego right now. A lot of students still just have online classes. And so the Triton Food Pantry had to get very creative because traditionally their model was you come to the pantry on campus and they give you food, which is a bit tougher for people that aren't in San Diego. And so they've really been trying to educate and raise awareness on a lot of the programs that exist outside of UCSD, like CalFresh. I mean, every week I get a notification on my social media like, are you in CalFresh? Here's how to do it. And they hold workshops all the time. And they've definitely been very flexible and creative with addressing student needs as this pandemic has kind of progressed.
That's great. No, thank you for that. I think that understanding how those that have been to campus and seen the Triton Food Pantry kind of have that visceral reaction. Again, like you said, you go up, you take your food, and that's the traditional way that a food pantry has worked. Adapting is so interesting and also so important to meet the needs of students. Moving on to a little bit different issue. Not just one area, but one thing we touched on a tiny bit, but I would like to get a little more depth about your thoughts, as well as the work of the Student Foundation and other work being done on campus, is the area of first generation students. What particular needs do you see in that area, and what is being done, or what's an important takeaway for somebody that wants to know more about supporting that group?
Yeah, that's my passion. I'm a first gen college student, and I would say the biggest thing that helped me over these past 4 years was mentorship. I didn't know when I came here. My parents told me, "All right, get C's, get your degree. Get your degree." To them, it was all about this little piece of paper you get after graduating. Uh, but I knew nothing about getting internships or networking or how to get lab opportunities because I'm in cognitive science, which is a research-based degree, and I knew nothing about this at all. And I think I came to my first alumni event. My friend invited me, and I showed up in like a t-shirt and shorts and a skateboard. Nothing wrong with that, but I, started talking to these alumni, and it was like they were speaking a completely different language. I had no idea how to communicate professionally or how to network or anything. And so the mentorship provided in Student Foundation is so amazing because we connect all of our trustees with these really awesome mentors that are really involved with the university. And in turn, I think I know I personally have been very inspired to become that mentor after I graduate. But then also too, mentorship from my peers within Student Foundation. There was something about being a first year and seeing our fourth year president at the time, and she was so well put together, and she taught me so much on how to pitch and how to fundraise and how to network and everything. And uh, that's been a big passion of mine, is figuring out how to be on that other end and further our mentorship program, especially right now when a lot of our trustees are meeting with their mentors virtually. And so, and also just trying to be be that fourth year friendly face, to some of our first year students.
Great, thank you. Katie, you mentioned this earlier too, how excited you are to just meet more people and to get to have that in-person experience, but also grow the circle beyond what it's been limited to during the course of the pandemic. I'm curious with each of you. I know Student Foundation has a particularly robust experience of mentorship and networking with alumni, but what would you want former UCSD graduates, UCSD alumni to know about what they can provide to students in terms of that, that networking support, or, in general, that, what perspective they have to offer would be valuable to you all?
I think so. Kayla did touch on the mentorship program. Love the mentorship program. Just met with my mentor Monday. Karen, she's amazing. Love her so much already. In terms of what alumni can do, and this is something I hope that when I graduate, I can give back to UCSD, is to help students gain that professional networking experience before entering the industry and the career field. Because now it's so competitive that before you even get an internship, you have to already have this professional aura around you. And when you're talking through Zoom, even, you have to be super professional, and facial expressions and everything is super important. And then they're like, what experience do you have? Mowing lawns? Okay, that you have to make that somehow be like, I had a business for mowing lawns and I was counting the money, making transactions, etc. Whereas probably, and this was for my parents, they were like, yeah, you could just mow a lawn, and they'd be like, great, you're hired. But now it's like, okay, well, you mowed lawns. What else did you do? So it's really important, and this is something I want to pass on, is that networking is super important. Being able to get new communication with alumni and just sharing the different opportunities that are out there at UCSD, because there's so many opportunities that even I, as a second year, probably have no idea exist, whether that be clubs or other associations on campus, even resources. I probably don't know of all the resources I could be using on campus. So if they're alumni, I think sharing your experience of using these resources or whatever clubs you were in, or how you got an internship within your field is really important and great to share with students who just need a little push in that direction.
Great, no, thank you. Steering it back a little bit toward the basic needs idea, because I think that it is important to understand that all these needs, from housing and food to psychological services to personal and career development, all intertwine in some fashion as you go through your college career. But steering back toward basic needs, I know one thing that has come up a little bit in this conversation, but I think maybe could be illuminate a little bit more, is the idea of students facing emergency circumstances. I know we got into emergency housing a little bit, but I know that there are a number of other things facing students that can cause their studies to go off track in some fashion, even something so small as, losing a mode of transportation or something like that. I'm just curious if you all have some perspective to lend, be it, from anecdotally from your peers or, through work that you've seen done on the campus that can help assist with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mentioned this before, but yeah, when the pandemic started, that's when my parents decided they would no longer be financially supporting me through college. And I mean, that decision was made, I think, like maybe 15 days before my billing statement for spring 2020, for UCSD for my tuition. And I, like many students, I think, like Katie brought up a good point, is that there are always going to be resources out there, that there are a lot, and maybe not all students are always aware of them. And for me, thankfully, through my work with the Student Foundation, I knew a lot about the Basic Needs Hub, and I felt comfortable going to them. And they were able to help me, really, no questions asked. And I'm so forever thankful, honestly. I don't know if I'd still I'd be in this call right now. But I think that, that's another big thing that the Student Foundation has focused on over the years is awareness and making sure that students are taking advantage of not just expanding the resources that we have, but taking advantage of the ones that are already there. Um, because there are a lot of students that don't know about these things and think that they have to do it alone with no help. I mean, even, with certain circumstances, I had a death in the family last quarter, and uh, my professors, I was able to go to them, and they were able to accommodate me. And UCSD has an incomplete program. There's so many different things out there, but I think students just need to know about that. And I think it's a two-way street too. When we, are having conversations like this, and there are alumni in the room, we have a room full of alumni right now that want to help. And, people don't know what they don't know. And I think raising awareness is just so important. I think having an understanding of what's going on, how we can, progress, that's how we progress.
Oh, thank you. That's really important. In terms of that awareness piece, do you think that through the course of the pandemic, the student body has become more aware of the resources that are available to help across the areas that we've talked about?
Yeah, and I think I definitely think a lot of the resources that we have, like I mentioned with Triton Food Pantry, have really emphasized and maybe prioritized raising awareness. I think digitally too is more important. I know my first year, the only way I really found out about resource centers and things going on was through tabling on Library Walk. And I think one of the big pros or silver linings of the pandemic is we've been able to move past that and start to spread information digitally online where more people will see it. And it's not like, oh, well, if you weren't walking down Library Walk at this time, you miss out. So I think that's a big piece of it.
Katie, I noticed you had unmuted when I asked the question as well. Did you have any additional thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Even though I entered college in the COVID pandemic, I feel like I got a lot of resources through emails. I might be one of the only students that actually reads every email I receive, but I think hopefully there are other students that read their emails. And through that, I know that a lot of professors have also been really helpful when it comes to sharing these resources. I didn't even know about the pass no pass system until my spring quarter of my freshman year. I kind of thought it was all letter grades, and I didn't know that a pass no pass system existed, nor did I know about the incomplete program until one of my professors told me. So definitely when it comes to not knowing about the resources you have, word of mouth is a great way for other people to know about, and also emails. The pass no pass, definitely I could have taken advantage of it more maybe. But I think with online classes and looking through emails, I kind of just went through it quickly because it was online, right? Like I don't get the idea of what a pass no pass means. Does it affect your transcript? Does it not? Can I still get a job with the pass no pass on my transcript? All my questions were there and they weren't answered until my professor directly told me that a pass no pass will not harm you in the future. It's just a resource for you to have.
That's great to hear, and important to understand all the different ways that students can take advantage of the supports, academically as well, that are out there. As we start getting closer to the end, I want to think about the ways that, as we've talked about things, maybe you've given some great examples, but also we've talked about some things in the abstract that students face these issues or this issue. I'm wondering if you can think a little bit about how frequently student needs change through the course of an academic career. Katie, I know you're a second year. Kayla, you're a fourth. And obviously the pandemic throws a wrench into things, but I just want to see if you can give some thoughts on how those of us that, you know, it's been some time since we were students, can understand what that experience is like and what types of support students need, you know, as they enter different phases of their time as students at UCSD.
I can speak on being a fourth year. It's definitely changed this year. My big push has been postgraduate job applications. And as someone in the STEM field, as Katie was saying, it's extremely competitive. Right now, the entry level job market is just extremely cold. I think in this cycle, I've applied to about 150 positions, and that's a pretty low number. And you know, juggling all of this while being in school and running student foundation and working two jobs and being in a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to do. And I think the thing that people need to understand that has changed a lot since from when some of our alumni maybe were graduating seniors is that out of those 150 job applications, I mean, not to toot my horn, I'm not the most I might not be the best candidate for all these positions, but out of 150 applications, I only heard back from one job. I thankfully ended up getting the job, but I'm still looking for more positions, but it's really tough. I had a friend who's in software development the other day, and he wrote a program that automatically he like made a bot that applies for jobs for him. And so now I'm like, well, gee, what if I'm running against people that are submitting thousands of applications everywhere? Like, no wonder. But it's just it's really tough, and it's pretty unprecedented, I think. Just like the sheer amount of like numbers that you have to beat. And so I think like in terms of connections and networking, that's more important than ever. And you know, who knows where I'd be right now if I didn't have all these extra things on my resume. And so also supporting students and encouraging them to get involved. It's why Student Foundation holds these workshops like Meet the Boss, and it's why we work with the Career Center, and it's why we try to put all these things together because it's just, I don't know how else to say it. It's tough out there.
And I'd like to add that with Kayla being a fourth year, I think the job search is definitely tough. But even as a second year, trying to find an internship is rough. This is something I learned about the accounting cycle is that I'm supposed to be applying for my junior year internship now. Deadlines are end of February for a lot of my junior year summer internships. If I didn't get this information and I found it in my junior year, I would have missed out on opportunities like this. So I think starting at freshman year, if we can just share as much information as possible with these freshmen and telling them like, there's these opportunities, this is how this works, or if there's this opportunity within your field, you know, I mean, it does take away from the fact that sometimes we just don't know what we want to do, but with it being so competitive, starting as early as possible is really important now. And that's one of the saddest things I have to say. Also, I think when it comes to student needs, it changes. One of the biggest changes would be this year is with Omicron. A lot of us did not see that coming. We did not expect to go back online for winter quarter, especially when we were in person in fall. Go 5 weeks into the quarter online, and then suddenly half the professors are like, oh, we're going to stay online. Others are like, oh, we're going to go back in person. So I think it's when we have really big changes within society or nationwide. I know a lot of colleges are facing this, as Kayla has mentioned, that student needs are going to change because we have we have so many things that we just have to do. We have to juggle school. Some of us have to juggle jobs, job hunting, being in clubs and extracurricular activities, and also being healthy, because if you're not healthy mentally and physically, you can't do any of these things. So juggling all of this at once is really hard. And when you have sudden changes such as like Omicron, it can really put a damper on just doing your academics or doing your daily life in general.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And just as a quick aside, some folks in the chat are mentioning Triton Connect, which is a great resource both for students to find alumni, but also alumni who want to give back to students and lend their expertise. We have frequent mentoring events through there, but also the opportunity to do that in an ad hoc fashion, as well as offer up jobs to those in the Triton community. It's a really great resource. That said, Katie, you mentioned this, and Kayla, you talked about the load as well. What that juggling is like, and how the number of different things, both changing and continuous, that you have to do as students, especially now, can make things difficult to thrive academically or to make sure that your basic needs are being met. There's obviously some push and pull between those, having to decide whether you're going to work or do something that might be more advantageous, academically. Really curious what that juggling means for you all, and what thoughts you have about, students having to do things to meet their basic needs, or that may have unmet basic needs, for instance, lack of transportation or housing, that have held them back. And if we could help, would really enable students to do a little bit more, both in and out of the classroom.
So when it comes to juggling, I have 2 planners and a calendar behind, and that just kind of shows how much stuff is happening just to be able to keep up. Resources, I think basic needs and the Triton Food Pantry definitely are super helpful when it comes to just providing the basic needs to, as I said, stay healthy. And then CAPS is a great resource for mental health. But I think we could definitely do more with CAPS, because it's just hard to get a hold of them all the time. You're not going to have a personal therapist with you 24/7. And if I have a breakdown, let's say Saturday night, there's no CAPS. They're closed. My roommate's gonna come in and be like, "Are you okay?" She's my therapist. I'm her therapist. But if I was to live alone, I wouldn't have anyone. I'd be alone. So being able to juggle everything definitely puts a mental strain, because there's days when you don't sleep. You got to get the assignment done. You got to study for that midterm or final exam, so you don't sleep. And I think a lot of us may have pulled all-nighters in the past, and the next morning we definitely don't feel 100%. And so being able to juggle all of this, I think it's really important for students to just know that there's someone there in their position, and understanding them and having that empathy. I think that's actually really, really important. It's to know that you're not alone in any of the situations you're in, and that there will be someone there for you. And if that's possible, whether that's through mentorship or even through CAPS, I hope every student can find a resource like that.
Yeah. Sorry, it's so hard to speak on some of these things that are just so personal without getting a bit emotional and vulnerable. But yeah, I mean, the question of how do you juggle it? I don't. I, on average, get probably around 4 hours of sleep every night. I pull an all-nighter at least once a week. But I consider myself lucky because even though I do have a lot of things going on, I'm lucky and thankful to be able to do what I love in my jobs. I'm a designer. How cool is that? I'm so thankful, and I know other first gen college students like myself that maybe aren't as fortunate, that don't have the, ability to be picky with their jobs. Maybe they have to, work really labor intensive jobs or work graveyard shifts or hours. I mean, we had one person in our organization that just couldn't continue this year because they were a full-time worker. Um, and so it's very hard to be a full-time student and to also, in a sense, do other things full-time as well. And so I just think, when I see other schools such as UCLA extending that grace of having pass no pass options, extending that grace into this year, um, I think it would be something that would be so appreciated by our student bodies to maybe have a bit more of an atmosphere of academic lenience. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. This is probably something to take up with the academic senate, but I think there are definitely things that our university can do to support students, with CAPS. I was lucky enough to get to see them. Unfortunately, I had to stop because the highest frequency they could meet with me was every month and a half. And if anyone's ever had like a first introductory meeting with a therapist, it's pretty tough because you're opening up and you're letting a lot of things out. And it just felt really counterproductive because every month and a half, it was like I was reopening this wound, but I wasn't able to work with someone consistently to help actually heal. And so maybe expanding those resources for mental wellness and support. And I really want to check the chat here. I want to thank, I read up all the way up here. I want to thank all the parents that have donated money, because even students recently voted to increase their own tuition and fees just to add more funding to CAPS. I think it's a very unanimous thing, but the more we can decrease that student to counselor ratio, I think it'll help a lot of other issues that students are facing.
I appreciate that. And I think I speak for everyone. We say we do really appreciate the perspective and vulnerability. It allows, I think, a lot more people to empathize in a way they could not with today's students. We're just in our final few minutes. So I just want to ask one more question, and I hope it's a hopeful one. And it's that you both started to talk a little bit about this, made me think about what would having less on your plate in terms of those basic needs, right? So if housing security and food insecurity and some of the other issues that we discussed facing students were not barriers, or that, those barriers were able to be removed, what would that mean for your studies, and what would that mean for you as a student in your UCSD experience?
I think financial security is definitely one of the biggest obstacles. Food insecurity and housing insecurity are also there, but that also comes at the price of financial insecurity. Being able to resolve that barrier would definitely be taking a lot off of our plate. If you just look at spending habits, the majority of spending goes to housing, food, and transportation. Now, I don't have a car. I bike and walk everywhere, or take the bus with the Pronto app. So let's take that away. That means all my spending goes to housing and food and my tuition on when I have to spend it. But if it's just monthly, we look at rent and we look at food. If that's taken away, I don't have to worry about anything. I can just focus on school and my extracurricular activities. And it would definitely be a burden that's lifted a lot. So I'm hopeful for future students who won't have to have that barrier, because it would definitely be much happier and much easier when it comes to doing schoolwork and extracurricular activities, when you don't have to worry about any of that.
I would want to say, I have lots of hobbies and passions like like painting and running and going to the beach. But honestly, at this point, I'm so tired. I think honestly, I would use that extra time to drop a commitment and to sleep. And again, part of this is just the college student experience. Honestly, I'm sure everyone in this call could relate to, what we're going through. Getting no sleep and, being on that 4-year grind is kind of just part of being a student. But I think, yeah, I would definitely take something off my plate. It is so important. Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel good good to see the sun come up and you're just, you're on your computer. And that's another thing too, is just before there was a bit more of like a work-life separation, which again, don't need to be a college student to relate to that one. But being in class, doing my homework, everything on my computer in my desk, I'm very much more stationary. And so just having that time to get out and go on a walk or go on a run and, as funny as it sounds, just like touch some grass, like that is honestly a highlight of my day.
Great. Well, thank you so much for both of us, to both of you for joining us today. Thank you to those of y'all in the audience for your questions and participation and just being here to listen and learn more about allying with the students that are really the bedrock of our Triton community. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. Kayla, Katie, thank you so much for your stories, your words, and your perspectives, and for representing UCSD and our students and our student foundation so well. So we are much appreciate you. Thank you everyone else. Please enjoy the rest of the conference. We'll be back tomorrow with more panels and sessions. You can check everything out in the hub that you registered through for Triton Leaders Conference, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Kevin.